Good evening. I'm Rabbi Jill Maderer from Congregation Beth Shalom, and just welcome and honor to you, Dani Menkin, for this incredible work. Thank you for your work. And welcome and honor to you, Rabbi Charlie Cytron-Walker, my friend and colleague. And welcome to all of you. Welcome to this community for a moment. I think it was.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming out in the snow.
Yeah.
I mean, down in Winston-Salem, everything would have closed down, but in Texas, everything definitely would have closed down. I'm glad. I grew up in Michigan. It's nice to know that there are some places that still know how to handle the snow.
I think Philadelphia can actually go either way. So I think it's a sign of how compelled folks were to be with you tonight that they made this effort this evening. It's such an intense experience we all just shared. And many of us may be alone in the congregation or in the audience. And I feel like just nobody should experience this moment alone. So I'd like to take a page out of our custom at Rodeph Shalom and actually turn around and find someone new to meet for a moment now. Shall we? All right. It is so good to be together, especially on this day, this week, when thinking of the hostages of today, we actually have reason for hope.
God willing.
Yeah, amen. Knowing the hate in the story of the gunman, and knowing the love in the heart of Rabbi Charlie here, and the multi-faith love in the heart of Rabbi Charlie, it's so powerful to be together and to scream this at the Weitzman, the home of Washington's letter to the Jews of Newport, when he said to bigotry, no sanction. I'm thinking of that being here in this house. So to begin, Rabbi Charlie, I'll ask you, I know you've spoken about this now for 3 years, and I'll just ask you, are there ways that we can speak about this with you that are less re-traumatizing and more can contribute to your healing?
So, as I mentioned at the end, there's a lot of gratitude that I bring, because while it was a challenging day on every level, there's so many things that went right. Among those, we didn't see someone get killed in front of us. None of us were physically injured, right? I mean, there were so many things that could have made that situation so much worse. I mean, all of us survived, right? So I think it's because of that I really haven't had any semblance of PTSD. When I talked to 3 therapists afterwards and really tried to pay attention to mental health and mental health care. There certainly were family challenges. Each of us went through our own process. Our community as a whole went through its own process. The Jewish community and the Jewish world as a whole went through its own process. And I'm really able to talk about all of it. You can ask any question. I really bring the gratitude that I get to be here with you tonight.
Dani, can you talk to us about the why? I remember sitting in front of CNN for hours and hours in the moment. Could not have imagined a film in that moment. Yeah. Can you talk about your why?
It's very interesting because, what we're facing now, I mean, Charlie and I were yesterday in New York and we're taking the train and he sees that, I'm browsing and I'm obsessed on refreshing on what's going on with the hostages. And it reminds me a little bit of those 11 hours that I was zapping between stations. Oh, what's going on? And remember, it was 11 hours, not 400 and who knows how many days already. So, and there were cameras, and I don't think they can order pizza there. So, I mean, that when I started, there was no October 7th. So that's what we had. And it's interesting, we had a meeting today with Jonathan Greenblatt at the ADL, and we said that this is a unique story because it's not October 7th. This is in America. It happened in Texas. So immediately I understood that there is something very powerful here. However, it was just after the event when I heard Rabbi Charlie speaking a few days after and saying that even though this has happened to them, they will not stop loving the stranger. And I was like, oh, wow, 1 second, they're still keeping the same values. And it's interesting because we took a long time when we made the film that we even maybe at some point questioned this loving the strangers after October 7. But then I think it dwelled on me even more that keeping your values after those extremists trying to hurt you and maybe change your value to be like them, I think this is possibly the biggest victory. And I think that's what brought me to this film on so many other things. And there is, of course, the filmmaking aspect of it, that it is a huge story that had a happy ending. And I'm way after a year of working on it, and suddenly I get all those 13 security cameras. So the movie was totally talking head. Pretty interesting, but could arguably be like a podcast, boring, another documentary, until I suddenly get that footage, and it changed it through filmmaking, from a filmmaking point of view.
How did you get the footage?
So yeah, it's a great question because it took me few times that I had to do a Freedom of Information Act. Whoever know me, I've done basketball movies, love stories. I've never had to send any letter to the FBI, never tried to do anything that has to do with some kind of a true crime thing, very different than what I had. But it did have my company name is Hey Jude, from the line of the Beatles, take a sad song and make it better. So it did have this bittersweetness because it has a happy ending.
And Dani is that guy, by the way. Like, take a sad song, make it better. All of that cheesiness. That is this man right here.
Yeah. And I'm guilty as charged, inspired by Paul McCartney. My friends, we were divided between Lennon and McCartney. I was McCartney, So in an event, it was a way into this project that I already had the 4 hostages and their families. I had Rabbi Buchdal interviewed Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, and then I started to speak with the FBI, and they said, we are really interested in the footage that you have because it's a success story for us. And I said, there is something that the synagogue used to have and can really help the piece that I'm making. And then they started to consider, and they stopped the investigation, and I was able to put my hands on it. And it started to be like a really thrilling movie because you can really see when Shane doesn't feel well. You can really see when Larry is released. You can see the pizza. You can see when Shane and Charlie are, laughing and they have their breakfast club moment, which is incredible because in this movie to have also funny moment, it's gold. It's like Charlie says in the movie.
So
it's
human.
Precious. It's human. And yeah, and I know a lot of people would probably want to know about Shane, and Charlie, you can speak more about him. But for him to walk to Larry and say, you go. I know I can, but you go. I mean, Charlie, you can speak about it more, but he said yesterday, he doesn't even need to do bris. That was his... That was his.
That is Brit Milan.
Welcome to the tribe. Yes.
Well, no, I mean that's actually not true.
Oh, he did it?
Because he did complete his conversion.
Do we have the footage?
But a few.
I can still
But
put it in.
No, but I mean, so a few months after the incident, we're back in the congregation. It took a little while. The FBI did a lot of damage, and it was. But we got to come back after a few months, and we're doing a service where we're welcoming in new families to the congregation, right? Acknowledging the new families from the past year, and it's a small community. And all of a sudden, one of our members is like, "What about Shane?" Well, Shane hasn't completed his conversion yet, so once he completes his conversion, they can become members. But hasn't he been through enough? Come on, Rabbi. And I kid you not, at a Friday night service, the whole congregation is chanting, "Shane, Shane." And when he finally completed his conversion, it was really, really wonderful all around. He really is an incredible, and he's involved in the board of the synagogue. He's on the board. He remains very, very involved, as does Jeff, as does Larry. Just absolutely phenomenal.
Rabbi Charlie, I'm thinking about this moment when you're sitting at the round table with your laptop and your phone, and I think the laptop's already out, you take off your talit. Mm-hmm. You still have the talit on. You take off the talit and set it aside onto the table. Can you remember that moment from when it was happening? And can you remember what you were feeling? What made you take it off in that moment?
I took it off because at that moment in time, it was pretty clear that the formal service was over. No, but
it was still on. Yeah, it was sort of interesting that it was still on at that point.
It was on for a little while into it, and it's like, because he's wanting us to call the FBI so that he can clear the area, so that no innocent people would be hurt in the bombs, right? He's wanting to speak with Rabbi Angela Buchdahl. And I'm like, that was such a sinking feeling because, everything that she expressed in the movie, all that helplessness, of course, I knew that there was nothing that she was going to be able to do. And this is what happens when people actually believe the lies of anti-Semitism. This is what happens when extremism and the misinformation and disinformation is allowed to persist unabated. There are some people that will actually believe it. And so the talit was not my first concern, right? But after that initial hour and a half, it was so tense, so stressful, so challenging. And as things start to, right, because there are down moments over the course of the day as well. And so that was one of the first down moments where I realized I had my talit on. And so to be able to set that aside with the acknowledgement that we probably were not going to be able to get to finish the service.
It was a powerful thing for you to have captured. And I'm realizing there's so much that wasn't captured. There was conversation going on between you and the gunman. There were words coming from the gunman that we're not hearing in the video. Is that right?
No, he was talking with us. He was getting to know us. He was using my phone. You saw him hand me my phone back and forth. We went back and forth all throughout the day. I had to get my charger out. It was like I'm charging the phone and the FBI negotiator calls, right? There's so many absurd moments But he's actually talking with us. He wanted to know about us. He wanted to know if we had children. He wanted to know, right? Like, I mean, it was such a strange situation. You do hear some of his rantings, and we got to hear a lot of those over the course of the day. Like that was something that he would come back to. It turned out that he didn't like Muslims, he didn't like Jews, he didn't like Americans, not a fan of Pakistan, if you couldn't tell. And so, I mean, he didn't like any, like there was so there was all sorts of things that were a part of, and many moments that were not captured. At one point in time, all these people are texting me. I was watching all of these texts come in, and we had people kept on trying to call, like the media. We're trying to call on the main line of the synagogue. And, I mean, media who tried to call me on my cell phone, right? During the situation, like, there was such absurdity in these moments, but he actually sees my phone at one point in time and is like, look at all of these people that like Rabbi Charlie. Rabbi Charlie's a good guy. Like, he actually promised us earlier in the day when the FBI negotiators were doing their thing and Larry gets released, he basically told us, I'm not going to hurt you. And of course that changes later on in the day. But I mean, it's just a, I mean, there's a lot that, this was an 80-minute film. It was an 11-hour situation. There was a lot of, that was not a part of.
Dani, can you talk about how you were able to bring out the words, the emotions from all of those folks you interviewed, the folks who were hostages, the spouses, who are not necessarily public speakers or film stars in their regular lives, and they were, I thought, so poignant, so articulate, so able to express deep feelings. How did that happen? How were you able to connect with them?
I felt I had a structure that is pretty straightforward. It's one day, one location, 11 hours, beginning, middle, and end, very much thrilling. And because I went through it, how many of you watched it live on TV when it happened? Pretty much. I mean, a lot of people. By the way, I showed the movie in Israel, the Doc Aviv Film Festival. None have seen it. Very few have known about it. Because when they were released, it was early morning in Israel. So in Israel, they heard, oh, there was an incident, they're fine. But we lived through that. So what I wanted to capture is the feeling that I had on those 11 hours. And then, again, the material kept bringing more and more through their text messages, through their testimonials, and mainly later on I got the sound from the police. And all those footage, the 11 hours, were not with sound. We had to sync it. We had to find where the sound, where it fits the picture. And I mean, that really in many ways it played for itself. When I heard the phone, this is Rabbi Charlie Cytron-Walker, you can call me Rabbi Charlie, to the dispatcher of the police, I was like, I could not stop listening to it. It was like, it was amazing.
But I will add, though, that Adina is really awesome.
Yeah.
She really is amazing, and a lot of people are big fans. She was the most popular, like I used to joke that she was the most popular person in the Muslim community. And a lot of Muslims in the community agreed with me. But I had to let people know that I know that you think that you're a big fan of Adina's, but I am her biggest fan.
Oh, nice.
It was interesting because she did not want to interview. She's very introverted, as I learned later on. And I was sitting with Rabbi Charlie. I don't know if you even remember that, just speaking about making the movie. and you're calling Adina to consult with her about, and I was like, I'm as a filmmaker, I need to do my job. I said, I want to talk to her too. I want to interview her too. And said, I don't know. And Charlie said, and he wants to talk to you too. And she's asking you if he's nice. So Charlie is saying, so she's asking me if you're nice. and there was like a big pause, and Charlie's looking at me. It's like, seriously, in his office, he's looking at me. He's like, I think he's nice. Yeah. So he said, okay, let's try for 25 minutes. And she's coming. She said, I'm really bad at this. And in those 25 minutes, she's giving me the whole range of emotions, everything you can think of and want as a filmmaker. This story about the promise, and her laughing and crying at the same sentence, in the same story. And really, to Rabbi Charlie's point, the relationship with the Muslim community, which was so important in this story, to show that we are not talking about the Muslim community at all. We're talking about an extremist. And in fact, they were the one that comforted her. And that was very important for us to show.
So powerful, yeah. Knowing, I know Rabbi Charlie from many years ago. And
before we were rabbis.
Pre-rabbis, it's
right.
True. And knowing him, and now that you know him a bit, I think you can see it also. It won't surprise us that he's slow to be called a hero. And so I think what I'd like to do is call Judaism and Torah and Jewish values the hero here. And the question is, how is it, Rabbi Charlie, that you were able to be calm and so deeply present that you noticed when the gunman's hand changed on the gun, that you knew what your moment was, and so clear about both spiritual presence and Jewish wisdom in the moment and actually thereafter as well?
I mean, Judaism's not a pacifistic tradition, right? I mean, and we're commanded to defend ourselves. And at the same time, if it weren't for all of the trainings that I had, I don't think that I would have had the courage to do it. After the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina at Mother Emanuel AME Church, right, the horrible tragedy that took place there, the FBI office in Dallas hosted a multi-faith, a very, very large session that was my first active shooter training. And it was the first time that I'd really learned and understood about the importance of emergency procedures, right? My attitude was, we're a small congregation, right? I mean, well, it's not just that, but we're a small congregation, right? And on the emergency procedure side of things, right? Thank God we actually had the lay leadership at a small congregation to really say this is important. And it's not just about what happens if somebody comes in with a gun. What happens if a child goes missing? What happens if there's a tornado? What happens in Texas? There are tornadoes, right? Like, what happens if? And to be able to ask those questions and have procedures and train on those procedures are very important. But that was my first time after Mother Emanuel AME. But I had attended half a dozen active shooter trainings. And while they're not fun, they're unsettling. I mean, our kids are doing lockdown drills in schools every day, right? It's not about fear, it's about preparation. It's not about panic, right? How many people have done first aid CPR, right? I mean, I can't see all that well, but a lot of people. And when you took that class, the next day, were you like out on the prowl? Like, who in the grocery store is going to have the heart attack so I can come and do CPR? I just learned it. That's not how it works, right? But if enough people know how to respond, then the chances are when there's an emergency, somebody might be able to actually help save a life. Active shooter training is the same. It can be fear-inducing. It's not how many people have been to active shooter training? Not nearly as much. And here's the thing, is that it's not just about the synagogues or the Jewish institutions, right? There could be an event not only at schools, but shopping centers, movie theaters. I mean, you know this as well as I do. How do we respond? And we're supposed to avoid the situation if we can and run away. We're supposed to deny if we're able to. Those weren't options for us. And we're supposed to defend. I will tell you that 6 active shooter trainings, none of them talked about what happens if the person has bombs, right? Like, that wasn't a part of the training. And so, but as Jeff indicated in the film, over the course of the day, we learned that there wasn't bombs. And so that moment, we were looking for that moment. Like, if you could see that where Jeff and Shane were when they called me over for the pizza, Jeff had set, like, Shane helped to free Larry through his actions. Jeff set up as close, he'd been to a couple of these trainings as well. Shane had not. But Jeff set up as close as possible to the emergency exit so that they would have the shortest distance to go. And when I saw that for the first time, it turned out to be the most vital time, right? But at the end of the day, he didn't have his hand on the trigger. And that was what I considered to be the best opportunity of the entire day. So I told the guys to run, and I threw the chair, and I was out the door right after them. But that was the opportunity that we were looking for, because the training said you needed to do whatever you could to get out of that situation. And so that training helped really save my life.
I think it's important for us to hear the importance of training and security work and the preparation we can do for that which we can't prepare. And I'm looking at my coworkers here because we've been doing this together for many years. And I just also want to say that you'll tell me if I'm sort of imposing my own thinking here, but as I watched you and as I heard the story, and I remember thinking that day, Charlie had his act together emotionally, spiritually, to be that present, training or not, to be that present, to have the stamina for that many hours, to be able to apply training takes extraordinary mindfulness.
Well, I mean, look, near the end, before like the final call with the FBI negotiators, but as it was getting later into the day, I mean, I started to have real challenges and difficulty. I was begging for my life, or begging for our lives, and it wasn't working for the gunman at all. And so I had to take all of those emotions and pull them back in. That was incredibly challenging. But I'm not going to say that when somebody's holding a gun on you that it's easy to stay focused, but it's certainly a motivator. But I think that trying to remain, knowing that he was having his ups and downs throughout the day. He was calling his family throughout the day. showing off for his kids with the gun, but every single call with a family member. Hi, I'm in America. I'm at a synagogue. I've got hostages. Stop crying, right? Like that was like a call, a basic call that he said over and over and over again, right? It was, and so seeing his ups and downs, we knew that we needed to do what we could to help to keep him calm. The FBI negotiators, it wasn't just the one who was on the phone with us, it was a whole team, right? They flew him in from Quantico. There was 250 law enforcement on site that day, right, contributing. Local PD and an FBI working hand in hand together. Knowing that we had no clue how many people, but we knew there were shadows in the windows. We knew that there was a lot of support. The pizza delivery guy was in, it wasn't the Pizza Hut person at that point. But it was, but we had, there was an FBI person in full tack gear that was, right, that was tossing the pizza to the door. I'm at the door, there's like 2 armored vehicles right out. Like we knew that we had support. And that really did mean a lot, right? I was texting with the chief of police of Colleyville over the course of the day, right? There was communication, and so I think that there are ups and downs over the course of 11 hours. And it was, but there were again, as I said, there was a lot of things that went right.
We heard from Dani how touched he was by hearing Rabbi Charlie's takeaway, that his guiding Torah continues to be to love the stranger. And I'll tell you, pre-Colleyville, Rabbi Charlie's already known among colleagues as somebody who has this generosity of spirit that we are all witnessing today, and that was there way before. And so my question is, as you think about the multi-faith messaging that you've brought, the work that you had already been doing for years, and then the takeaways after and the work that you've done since, you talk about that multi-faith experience.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I moved to a new community, right? Like in October before the incident, CBI and I, went different ways. And so I'm in Winston-Salem, and so I'm creating a new community and getting to know people. It's the only synagogue in the county, in Forsyth County. And it's an easy thing to do, right? It's an easy thing to do, and then October 7th happens, right? And I don't know how many people here lost friends, right? But I know that a number of people did. A number of the multi-faith relationships that were so strong were either cracked or fractured or even shattered in so many communities across the country, right? Hearing these heartbreaking stories from colleagues who had worked side by side for so long. And after what happened to us, what did we get? After we experienced trauma, what does everybody need? We all need love and support. And we got it. And that was so healing and so important. But here's the thing, and this was the message that I shared. Jill, I think you were there at the CCAR, right? We were just showing like the trailer and talking with colleagues about the movie. And this was post-October 7th. This was last March. And my colleagues are asking about how do we do multi-faith relationships when there's been so much that's been broken. And my response to them and my response to you is we can't fight anti-Semitism alone. Or if we try, it's not going to work out nearly as well. We need we are going to have our disagreements, and sometimes painful ones. We're not always going to get what we need, and we need to find ways to maintain our relationships. I mean, loving the stranger is a lot harder than loving your neighbor, but sometimes loving your neighbor is hard enough, right? I mean, acknowledging and understanding that we are going to have painful disagreements. Where can we work together? Where can we agree? Where can we be in a relationship? How do we get to the point where I can share my pain? And how can I get to the point where I can hear yours? Right? And that's the question that we has to persist, not just within the Jewish community. But I mean, this is the problem with polarization that we've been living with for almost a decade, right? And just how much worse it has gotten. But with the rise of anti-Semitism, we need to be able to understand that what is anti-Semitism, what is not anti-Semitism, and when people are chanting "Gas the Jews," right? When people on college campuses, right, and other such inflammatory moments, when anti-Semitism right now is real. It's very real. It's very palpable in so many different parts of our world. And to fight it, to push back against it, we need to push back against extremism in all of its forms. And that has gotten a lot harder. But just because it's harder doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. And Judaism has never shied away from doing the right thing. I mean, we've had wonderful rabbis like Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who has a great quote that I can't remember all of it, but something about how doing Jewish sometimes is the art of doing the impossible. And that's the tenacity that we have to remember that we have as a people, and that willingness to be able to reach out. And if you've been beaten down, and if you need to take a break, then take a break and let someone else take up the slack. And when you've had a moment to grieve and mourn, reach out that arm, extend that invitation again, try again, because as I see it, we don't have any other choices. That has to be central.
Amen. In a moment, we're going to open it up and hear a few questions, and I think Matt and Dan may have some microphones, and I'll just ask one more question, and then we'll get there. And that is just to really make sure that the point is clear. The focus on the Muslim community in particular, and soon after this, what was the purpose?
Look, and by the way, anybody who is worried about driving home, or if you're falling asleep, because it's late, that's okay, right? I would say that when it comes to the Muslim community, because of the relationships that we had, because of the friendships with Asra and Aisha and Salima, who were Shazad, who was mentioned, and so many others, right? Because of those relationships, I knew, and we collectively knew, without having to be told by anyone in the Muslim community, that the Muslim community was terrified. They were absolutely terrified that people would think that all Muslims were the gunmen. Right? And after the attack in New Orleans, plenty of fear in the Muslim community that people are going to automatically think that everyone is going to drive into a crowd, right? That doesn't happen right? It doesn't happen in every religious group. And so those relationships, I mean, after October 7th, and a month or so in, there was this poor boy in Chicago, a Muslim boy in Chicago that was killed by, right? He was stabbed, right, by the landlord or whoever it was. And it was this tragic situation. And I called up the two imams in town, and I had only known, we were establishing positive relationships, but they were only a little over a year old, right? A year and a half old. And I said to Imam Yoel, and I said to Imam Khalid, and I said, we need to at least have a conversation. And we didn't agree about everything in that conversation, but we started the conversation with a handshake and a hug, and we ended the conversation with a handshake and a hug. And we have to keep those lines of communication open. And that remains the case.
Yeah, thank you. So I know that in our remaining time, we just want to hear more of Rabbi Charlie and Dani's voices, so that will motivate to us to keep to questions and to brief questions if we have any. So Matt and Dan, are there any questions in the group?
Hi, thank you for producing and directing and the movie. This is a question for Dani. The special agent in charge drew a lot of criticism for how he mischaracterized the motive. Did you think about including that in the movie?
Are you talking about the FBI, Mark DeSarno?
Yeah.
He could not have been nicer, kinder. He absolutely acknowledged that this is an anti-Semitic hate crime event. What he mentioned, and Charlie,
that was taken out of context
totally
by one specific person, and I'm not going to call them a reporter, right? It was. So there was a comment that was taken out of context where, while they were still in the process of investigating, there was some comment about it not being considered anti-Semitism because they weren't at the part of their investigation where they could declare it officially as a hate crime. It was something along those lines. But no, Matt DeSarno and the whole FBI office, I mean, they're absolute heroes. And without their help and cooperation, we would not have been able to make it out of there. And the critique that he got afterwards was largely due to misinformation, clickbait reporting, and it was completely inaccurate and outside of not only the literal words that he said, but every intention that he offered. I mean, and Director Ray, who I met on a couple of occasions, right, had to, right, Matt DeSarno and SAC, Special Agent in charge of the Dallas office, and Christopher Ray had to respond back for weeks, stressing that this was an anti-Semitic incident because of this one person's irresponsibility.
Dani, did you have anything else on that?
I mean, in many ways, I want to say it's about the way you knew Rabbi Charlie before within that character. So everyone that I met within this in the making of this film, I always thought that, these guys, what's beautiful about doing a documentary is that you don't really write the story. I mean, in many ways, God writes it, and it writes itself. And I was like, these guys really did not choose to be in that situation. And I always thought that situation chose them. Because it was just unbelievable that, from everyone in the world, they chose Rabbi Charlie. And I thought to myself, why is that? And I thought maybe it is to spread that important message.
I don't know if I can go there with you, but I hear you. I hear you. Was there anybody else? Matt, help me out. Who are you seeing?
You want to, yeah.
And there's somebody in front. So you got a couple people.
One of the things that stood out to me was that it was 4 male hostages and a male terrorist, but his objective was to free a female prisoner and calling upon a female rabbi for help. Could you talk about what your feelings were on that, if you had any at the moment?
I mean, I would just say about that it was pretty funny. I mean, it's in a thrilling story. There are funny moments that she was a question on Jeopardy 2 weeks before, and that's why she was ranked #1 rabbi on Google. And he Googles her and he says, "Oh, she's playing guitar. She's a woman. She can help release Lady Al-Qaeda because this needs a woman touch." And of course, the strongest rabbi in the United States, what he called the chief rabbi, will release Lady Al-Qaeda because what he says, Trump and Biden together, his words, will do whatever Jew asked them to do. So, I mean, it was ironic and I think, Charlie, it was scary at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course it was scary, but I mean, so many things went right that day, right? We were coming out of COVID, so there was me and 3 others in the congregation. We had 2 couples who were on the older side that thought about coming that didn't. We had a young mother with 3 beautiful daughters and her mother. So 3 generations, 5 more people that were regulars on Saturday morning during, while the building was open, that didn't come. So we had the potential of having, realistically, 9 more people in the room that day. Thank God they didn't show up, right? And so that's just the way that it happened, right? It's but it could have, again, as I said, it could have been a lot worse.
We have one over here. Okay.
Thank you so much, and kol hakavod.
Can you speak right into the microphone?
Sure. Thank you so much, and kol hakavod, accolades. But my question is, how much would you say was, on your part, was instinctive, if there is such a thing, or your instincts were conditioned by your training, so you were up to the...
Well, looking for an opportunity to get out of that situation was very much a part of the training. And a lot of it was listening, right? He wanted to be heard. He wanted to be heard by someone. And I think that all of us did the best we could to listen. And sometimes we talked back and sometimes we challenged, gently, but challenged what he was saying. And so I think that all of us just did the best we could, but there were times where, like, the guys, when they went back to the bathroom, were wondering about maybe opening the door, so that the FBI could easily come in. And they thought about that, and I went back, but they were worried that there were, like, alarms on the building, like in the exits. I knew that there weren't, but I didn't think about opening the door for the FBI. Jeff, afterwards, he said that was brilliant. And I said, like, we're in this armored vehicle, and I was like, what? He said, you yelled run. And I was like, I didn't think that was all that special, but he was trying to figure out, well, when the time comes, how are we all going to move together? And how are we all going to know? And so they thought about things, I thought about things, we thought about different things, mistakes were made, right? And so a lot of it was instinct, but there certainly were aspects that were a part of the training. But I will tell you that, now SCN actually does have how to be a good hostage, or like how to survive a hostage situation training based on some of our experiences, but that didn't exist beforehand. So we just, the training only covered so much.
I think we have time for one more.
Rabbi, hi, thanks for being here. You said that you couldn't have done it without the FBI, and specifically the head of the FBI. Could you enlighten us as to what exactly they did and how that helped you throw the chair on the hostage taker and run out the door?
Well, I can't say that it helped me throw the chair and run out the door, like that aspect of it. But I mean, what the FBI was doing all throughout the day was constantly monitoring the situation, constantly trying to figure out, could they take action, could they not? FBI had an opportunity they had like a clear line, a clear shot. Like an FBI sniper could have taken a shot, but we had 3M film, right? It's not bulletproof film, but it's film that prevents the glass from shattering, which is generally a positive. And in this situation, it could have altered the trajectory of the bullet. But I mean, they were constantly trying to figure out what is the best way to handle this situation. They did a wonderful job to keep everybody safe in the community as this was happening, as this was taking place. They flew in the negotiating team. I mentioned it was a team. They flew in from Quantico. We had the best of the best who were working on helping us. That team was translating everything. They identified who he was. That was a big question because he wasn't giving his real name. So in terms of the work that they were constantly monitoring the situation, is now the time to go in? And so when we were leaving, or as that was playing out, they were deciding to go in. And so it just happened to work out that we were able to escape first. But they had also recognized the danger of the situation, that it had gotten to the point where but they were there and ready and primed on a moment's notice to come in to save us. And so I give them all the credit in the world. The professionalism that they showed, the conversations that I've had with so many of them after the fact, and being in presentations. Like the counterterrorism unit of the FBI has an all-hands training once a year. And I was privileged to present with SAC DeSarno and with the Chief of Police, Mike Miller, at that just a few months ago. And to be able to see and understand from the law enforcement side and to hear their presentation about all of the work that they did, there is such gratitude, such gratitude. We had no clue how much they were doing on our behalf, and I give them all the credit in the world.
I think we give a lot of credit here to Dani, your exquisite storytelling that lifts up the fact that it was on the bima that there was the best of the best that day.
And I never thought I will show this film when the floor up is that chair. It's right here, so whoever want to see the chair, it is right here, and there is also...
So if you didn't know...
Along with Washington's letter.
But on the first floor, so when you, on your way out, there's a small little exhibit that it's easy to pass by, but there's the teacup that I served him tea, and the chair that I threw. It's here in the museum, and you can see it on the way out.
Yeah, and we will be here also if you want to ask. I saw more people want to ask questions, so we will be able to answer it privately to you guys, and we'd love to stay in touch with you. If you like the film, if you think it's worthwhile, please reach out to other communities. It's really a word of mouth. It just started.
Yeah, but post on social media, heyjudeproductions.com, And that's where you can get a link to the trailer. And we want to show this in as many places as possible. We think that the message from the multi-faith to the anti-Semitism to the pushback against extremism, and so many more important messages that are inherent in sharing this story. We want to show this as widely as possible. And look, I will say this, Dani's not, but if anybody wants to help support this film and help it get a wider distribution, please come and talk to Dani. We want to try to get it out to be shown in many more places. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.